Well, after a stormy night in the south, we take a minute to catch our breath, but don't put away those snow shovels just yet. Winter is set to return in a big way. A new storm system is going to bring snow, ice, and flooding rains to the east. I'll have all the details, plus we'll take a look at the longer range, which might feature an iconic storm. Don't go anywhere. A new episode of Cold Rain's Weather World starts right now. Hi folks, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Jason Pritchard, your host of Cold Rain's Weather World, and we have got a fun-filled, action-packed, exciting edition of the show today. We're going to talk about the current weather conditions around the country, and we're also going to take a longer look today at the longer range pattern, and by that I mean the week 1 to week 2 time frame, which could feature a fairly significant storm. We've been talking about this for probably more than a week on Twitter, and certainly for the last week here on this channel, about the possibility of a significant, maybe even a memorable East Coast snowstorm as we work into the latter part of February. Now, before we get into the details, I would like to remind you to please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on notifications so that you're notified when new videos come out, and leave a comment in the comment section. It could be a question that you might have, a suggestion for the show, or even more importantly, a prayer request. Maybe something's going on that you need me or the community to pray over. We're happy to walk alongside of you as you go through whatever you're going through, and we want to lift you up and encourage you. And so this channel is all about that. We talk about the weather, but we also want to encourage each other and have a place here where we can build each other up and have fun along the way. So with that, we're going to start with today's trivia question as usual. And let me pull it up here and let's see what it is. Okay, this is one that many of you probably know. If you don't know this, you're going to find out. Stick around to the end of the show and I'll have the answer. What is the phenomenon where precipitation evaporates or sublimates after it falls from the clouds before reaching the ground? Number 1, is it dew? Number 2, grapple? Number 3, virga? Or 4, hydrosuperfractional cold advection? The answer might surprise you, or it might not. We'll find out here in a few minutes. Now, let's start with some pictures from the winter storm that just affected the mid-Atlantic region. And this is courtesy of News 8 out of Richmond. And you can see, I just wanted to show you these because I thought this was kind of interesting. Ice and snow, boy, the ice really weighs the trees down, particularly once it has some snow on it. The ice, freezing rain accumulates on top of that. You really get a lot of tree damage. There was 20, I keep saying 0.25, but it's a better way to say that would be 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice all up and down the mountains in Virginia and West Virginia and northern North Carolina. Virginia, I think, got hit the hardest. You can see the icicles here hanging off the rails. Look at this. Trees all over the roads, branches down. 1/2 an inch of ice is pretty devastating. Probably there were some spots that had more than that. And if we scroll down a little bit further, you can really see this one here. This is a good example of just the devastation that ice can do when it accumulates to that degree. So some really interesting pictures out of Virginia. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the, let's go back to the surface map just to kind of show you this real quick. So we've got our cold front that brought all of the severe weather to the south. That is moving out. We've got rain up and down the front. So I picked up about an 1 3/4 inches here at the house. It was very, very cold rain, 34, 35 most of the time. But we got a lot of rain here. A lot of flood watches were up, and there are some still up, and we'll take a look at those. But those waves of low pressure are propelling the front on through. We've got the colder air behind this feature here that's plowing in. As you can see, there's still plenty of clouds here along the East Coast. Looking out the window today, though, we're starting to clear out here in Morganton. And so it's a nice sunny day. Probably have some sun tomorrow before the next system moves in, and you can already see that moving into the West Coast. Winter weather watches and advisories are up along the West Coast. We've got heavy rains in California. We've got heavy snow in the Cascades down into the Sierra Nevada. That's all going to be moving into the center part of the country over here in the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountains. And then it's going to really take shape here and move on off to the Northeast. And we'll see that here in just a few minutes. Now, satellite imagery, I rolled this back from this morning. It was pretty interesting as the sun was coming up. I was looking at this earlier. I had some errands to run today, so I couldn't get to the video, and I really wanted to show this. Let's see if we can go back, because this is pretty interesting here. As the sun comes up, you can really see the shadow of the clouds, the higher clouds on the lower clouds, and that's just a really interesting image. I thought that was fun to look at. So you can see that. Look at the sun coming up, and the shadow really made some interesting features here in the satellite picture. But you can see storm system pulling away up here, new system coming into the west coast, lots of cloud cover across the country. And so here in the middle, this is snow. This is snow that is falling, so or has fallen. And so it looks like clouds. It shows up because it's cold, but it's really interesting to see the snow footprint on the ground from a satellite image. So that's really good there. Now we're going to pop over here and take a look at Zoom Earth and look at the winds. Now we've got high wind warnings that are out here in this area of Wyoming, and you can see the wind barbs, how they're funneling in. So we've got cold air advection all across the eastern part of the country. It's going to turn colder over the next couple of days. You know, you can really pick up this area of low pressure here where the winds are circulating counterclockwise. So that's pretty neat. If we go to the temperature, we can see current temperatures around the country. Billings at 13, Bismarck at 10. These places were minus zeros yesterday, and so and overnight. So they're warming up a little bit, but you can see the cold air is just socked in over much of the country. This is going to be moving south and east. The brunt of the cold is going to occur over the center part of the country. So we're going to really see some cold weather here. That's going to bleed east over time and set the stage for what's going to end up being a winter storm in the northeast. If we kind of drill in here to the upper Great Plains here, we can see maybe a few more cities here, but -1 at Grand Forks, Moorhead -4, and so on and so on. But it's going to be cold for a couple of more days here. Now let's go to our hazards map, okay? So what you're seeing here, of course, is show this probably every day. You're seeing winter storm warnings in pink. This is where we're expecting more snow. 20 inches of snow could fall in parts of the Rockies. These are high wind warnings here in the gold kind of color. Winds can gust anywhere from 50 to 60 miles per hour here. And then we've got extreme cold warnings. Those are expiring really probably now. I think they're set to expire at noon today. And then we've got a bunch of cold weather advisories. And then we've got our flash flood watches that are up. You've got these little green areas here. These little light green areas are flood warnings. And so more rain to come through this area here, and then up in the northeast, winter weather advisories as that system pulls away, winter storm warnings, upper peninsula there of Maine, if you will. So that is our hazards map. Not quite as much activity as yesterday. We kind of got a little bit of a quieter period, but that's going to change pretty markedly as we get into the course of the weekend. Now here is our WPC precipitation forecast over the next several days. Now you've seen this over the last couple of days decrease in amounts. Well, part of that reason is because a lot of that rain has already fallen. But you can see here that up in the western part of Tennessee up through Kentucky, the WPC is still predicting as much as 5 to 7 inches of rain in spots here. Rain really is going to take shape in all of this area. So anywhere in this purple, you're looking at 0.1, 0.5 inches of rain or more. Just pay attention as you go through the week. You'll see flood watches continue to pop up in some of these areas. If we go over here and take a look at the European ensemble, this is from last night's run. Lines up pretty well with the WPC. We've got that little gap that we saw on the map here in North Carolina, but really that little gap, what is that? About an inch. I mean, that's still a pretty good rainstorm. So plenty of rain to fall in this area. Have your umbrellas handy, or as they say in Britain, your brolly. Keep your brollies handy. And then we'll take a look. So attention will turn here to severe weather. Now, as the system takes shape over the course of the next couple of days in the heartland, another round of severe weather can be expected in this area down here from eastern Texas to Louisiana, all through much of Mississippi into Alabama and Georgia. They've already got an enhanced risk for day 3. So this is looking Saturday into Sunday. You're looking at a nice return flow out of the Gulf, plenty of moisture to work with, probably we'll have to see how much instability exists, but there's probably going to be some level of instability, but there's going to be quite a bit of shear as well. So we could be looking at a fairly decent wind threat and also a tornado threat. So not going to really dive into too many of the details here. We can take a better look tomorrow when we know a little bit more about how the system is going to unfold and where it's going to move exactly as we get into the Saturday, Sunday timeframe. But if you're anywhere in this yellow area here, be on alert as you go through the weekend. Now, here's our surface map. We're going to start out here at, let's just roll this back. This is the European deterministic run. I show this because the European is usually regarded as the most skillful model. Now, all models lose their skill pretty rapidly as you get beyond day 5. So know that as we roll this forward and take a look at how systems are moving across the country. But you can see right here at the beginning, we've got the storm system working into the West Coast. Very heavy snow here in the Sierra Nevada, heavy rain in California. It's good that it's not so dry there anymore. They've had a lot of rain recently. This other storm system in the Northeast is pulling out, quiet, high pressure, dominating the center of the country. Now, pulling this forward, you can see that system come into the West Coast. It's starting to take shape here and affect the Front Range, the Rockies, down into Colorado, across the Northwest. That's going to pull east over time, and you can really see that return flow setting up out of the Gulf. Clash between the cold air mass and the warmer air mass here. Of course, you're going to get snow where it's cold enough, high pressure, 1040 high pressure up here in Canada coming into the United States, just nosing on in. And so if we roll this forward in time, you can see the severe threat taking shape down here. You've got a low pressure area over West Virginia, cold front extending back to the southwest, really rich moisture coming in out of the Gulf. And you can see this line here. It doesn't really do a good job. This model isn't designed, this graphic isn't designed to show thunderstorm activity, but there's going to be quite a bit of it in this area here. And up here in the Northeast, look, we've got icing, we've got sleet. The pink is freezing rain depicted by the model. The orange is sleet, and then the blue is snow, and it gets rather heavy here. And if we just advance this along, you can see how the low pressure moves on up into the Northeast, bringing plenty of moisture. The cold air is feeding in. These high pressure systems in Canada are just feeding this cold air into the storm. It's cranking up. And look at these isobars too. You can see how closely they are together. This is going to be windy. So this is going to bring some, as a storm develops and matures, there's going to be windy conditions that develop all along the Great Lakes, into the mid-Atlantic, down into North Carolina. It kind of abates a bit here, so it's not going to be so bad. But up here, there's going to be plenty of wind-driven snow. And as we get on through the weekend, Monday morning, we're looking at the system kind of wrapping up, pulling away. So you're really going to have a 24 to 48-hour storm system that affects the Northeast. And so very wintry up there. Great pattern for the Northeast. You guys have had a ton of snow. A ton more is coming. And so just be on the lookout for that. High pressure works in. Look at this, 1054. This is a big high pressure, folks. This is going to be cold. This brings some bitterly cold Arctic air right into the United States. Light snow across the portions of the Rockies into the plains here. If we pull this forward, you can see the next storm system beginning to take shape. And this is the one that we're going to be watching closely as we get into next week. Now, the European model, if we pull this out in time, is not so enthusiastic. Now, this was last night's European model. Actually, no, this is not. I changed this. I had last night's up and I actually changed this. So last night's was not all that enthusiastic about any sort of winter weather in the South. But look here what happens. You got a 1042 high pressure, wind circulate, remember, clockwise around high pressure, so it's just funneling in the cold air into the eastern half of the country and the central part of the country. And if we put this forward, you can see the European model bringing a system here out of the south, pulling moisture up into the cold air. And what do we have? We have ice, we have sleet, we have snow starting to break out in the Carolinas. Moving it forward again, it looks like a fairly significant ice storm if you take the model verbatim. Now, we're looking at February the 20th here, so that's a few days out. That's 7 days out. That's an eternity in model land for anything to change. And as we all know from living in the South, well, not all of us live in the South, of course, but some of us do, and as the Southern folks know, the northwest trend is a real thing. So we want to watch out for that. We don't want to get fooled into thinking just because the model starts showing snow here in the south, we're definitely going to get it and we go tell all of our friends and neighbors about it and then look silly when it turns into rain, because we know that these things kind of work off to the north and to the west as we go forward in time. There are reasons for that. We won't get into those, but we tend to see that across most of the models. And so we pull this forward. Got a 10-12 low developing off of Charleston here. And then we go on a little bit more in time. It doesn't really do much with the system. It brings it up the coast and you get snow along the coast here. So again, don't focus too much on exactly where the snow falls, but the point that I want to make here is that most of the models agree that there's going to be a system in this vicinity down here in the southeast or mid-Atlantic working up the coast. And so, you know, the European goes on to take it kind of off the coast, and then we roll it on forward in time. Another storm system gets suppressed down here. It moves on out, and it looks like a little bit of a quieter pattern. Some light snow into the northeast. Another system working through, probably a clipper system working through the Great Lakes. You got plenty of cold air moving across those lakes. You're going to have some snowfall that occurs in the lee of the lakes. The lake effect snow machine is going to be cranking up. And there's the end of the run, 360 hours out. So active pattern. We're not looking at something that we're going to sit around and twiddle our thumbs and not have anything to watch. We're going to have plenty to watch as we go into the rest of the work week. Now, next up on the docket is our long-range outlook. Now, before we get into that, we need to have a word from today's sponsor. Here at Cold Rain Weather Command, we are a small operation, but we're a spunky and growing outfit. But we need sponsorship, and so if you have any suggestions on who could sponsor the show from time to time, let me know in the comments section. In the meantime, today's sponsor is All Day Cleaners. Is your washing machine on the fritz? Is the laundry piling up? If so, head on over to All Day Cleaners, where we minimize your time and maximize our profit. At All Day, our washer and dryer runs day and night. There's normally a long line, but that's okay because you've got all day. But if you're lucky enough to find them empty, just throw in your laundry and have a seat in one of our comfy lawn chairs. Of course, our coin-operated machines only take bicentennial quarters, and our change machine rarely works. But once you figure it out, you'll be done in no time. Maybe. But wait, there's more. Since our plumbing hasn't been updated since 1937, we'll be sure to turn all of your whites a rich golden brown color absolutely free. And that smell is something that will bring you back for more. So come see us at All Day Cleaners. We may not be fast, but that's okay. You've got all day. Hours of operation are 1 to 2 a.m., closed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay, thank you, All Day Cleaners. Okay, we're back with the long range outlook. Now we're going to start with the CPC 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. They put these out every day. And so this is the current outlook as of, I guess it was issued yesterday. I haven't seen today's yet, but anyway, we've got, I'm sure the idea will remain the same based on the modeling that I've seen. Below normal probabilities in the east, the blue, the darker the blue, the greater the probability. We've got this little tiny little high probability area over West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina. Warmer than normal out west in the 8 to 14 day time frame. What about precipitation? Well, much of the country is below normal, but we've got a slight signal for above normal precipitation as we get out into the week 2 period. An overlapping of colder than normal and above temperatures and above normal precipitation could be a good thing in the wintertime. It's certainly better than seeing below normal precipitation and above normal temperatures. So it puts us in the game for something interesting to happen. Now let's take a look at the CPC hazards map, okay? This is a risk for a high risk and a moderate risk for very cold temperatures. So this is looking at February the 20th through the 26th. So we've got a slight risk of cold for much of the country, a moderate risk for cold. I told you earlier this was going to be centered predominantly in the center part of the country, at least to start, and then high risk for cold temperatures here. So you guys get ready for freezing conditions, probably some cold weather warnings. Bundle up, it's going to get cold here. What about precipitation? So we'll flip over to that. We don't see any sort of precipitation hazards in that time frame. We've got flooding rains that are going to occur prior to this. So those maps that I showed you earlier with the inches of rainfall, much of that occurs prior to this period. What about wind? Do we see any risk for wind? We do. And one of the reasons that we see a risk for wind here is the potential for a significant East Coast snowstorm that could wrap up and bring a lot of wind to the region. And speaking of snow, there's a slight risk of heavy snow in the mid-Atlantic down to upper portions of the southeast. Now, why is that the case and what's coming? So let's take a look here. If we look at, and I will flip this over to another display, there we go. So we can see our MJO. We talk about this sometime, the area of tropical convection and where it exists. It can influence the jet stream in a favorable way for cold or an unfavorable way for cold in the east, depending on its orientation. So the European model here shows where we are today, 12-13, and we go here and here and here through phase 8 down into phase 1. So that's a pretty good progression. That's what we want to see in the wintertime if we like cold weather. 8, 7 maybe, but generally 8, 1, 2, and 3 are what we like to see. The GFS is very similar to this. I'm not going to show it, but it takes it on into phase 2 here. So very good progression for the MJO. A lot of times we see the spending time over in the warm side. We don't like that. What about those phases? Now let's go back over here, look at temperature, okay? So we've got phase 8. So I wasn't lying to you, right? So let's go back over here. I want to click on January, February, March. All right. So January, February, March, phase 8. Actually, we could look at February, March, April. That might be a little bit more accurate here. So phase 8, cold in the east, where we've been. Phase 1, cold in the east, warm in the west. Phase 2, pretty much the entire country looks to be below normal. Phase 3, similar to that. Phase 4, things start to warm up. But we're progressing nicely through phase 1, 2, and 3 over the course of early March. So we would expect the skew, if we're just looking at the MJO in isolation, we expect the skew to be colder in the east, warmer in the west. Now, nothing exists in isolation in the world of weather. There's so many dynamic variables at play, one of those being La Nina, kind of getting its act together a little bit, a weak La Nina, that could influence the pattern and nullify some of the stuff we're seeing with MJO, but it may not. But there is a potential fly in the ointment to this, and we'll take a look at that here in a minute. Now going back over here, let's get back into centering this on the screen. We're going to go back to the European ensemble. This is from last night. The 12Z ensemble hasn't finished running yet, so we're just going to show you what the ensembles are seeing here. So we're going to start at day 7, and we're going to roll this forward. We've got a big block. You can see that big block showing up here in the center part of central Canada, and that block is responsible for pushing the jet stream south. You see that right there? That's what we're looking at. Jet stream kind of comes in south like this. You've got a big trough in the eastern part of the country or the central part of the country that's spreading east. And look at this feature here. This is what we like to call a 50-50 low. Now, this is important for East Coast winter storms, and I'll tell you why that is. Once you get this feature established, and a lot of times blocking from Europe all the way into through Greenland into the northern eastern part of Canada can help to anchor this in place. But what happens here is air comes, high pressure has a tendency to develop and form and move into the northeastern part of the United States like this. And when you have this feature in place, these lines, you see how these lines kind of come together like this? That's called confluence. That locks high pressure in place here, which allows it to feed cold air right down the eastern seaboard like that. When this feature moves out, high pressure, then what does it do? Well, it doesn't have anything to lock it in place, so what does it do? It goes whoop, right out here into the Atlantic. Bam! Any precipitation falling turns to rain. We don't like that. We want to see, if we're like winter storms, we want to see this feature remain in place. So let's see what happens. Does it remain in place or does it move on off? There comes our storm system building in, and that feature's rotating out. Okay, this was the overnight run of the ensemble. However, that said, the ensemble did have a fairly decent snow signal pretty far south. So maybe the timing works out where the high pressure stays in long enough to keep the cold air in to mix with the precipitation from the storm, and we get a little bit of snow before things move out. But in any event, that's what you want to look for if you're looking at the upper air pattern. We can go in and take a look. Here, let's go back to that again and just roll it forward. So you see the ensemble through the end of the month. We have another trough. This is actually a really good a signal for, an East Coast storm where you've got this shaded area here, this blue area that goes out like this. This is lower pressure, cooler temperatures here. So we've got a nice period here to keep our eye on according to the European ensemble. And we'll roll it on forward. Look how strong that signal grows here in the southeast. So colder weather is on tap as the European ensemble sees it through the end of the run, which takes us out to 0Z Friday the 28th. This is the 27th. Now the GFS ensemble will show this too. Similar situation here. We'll roll that on forward. GFS looks to be a little bit more moderate in terms of its temperature regime. Instead of just cold after cold after cold, it moderates a little bit, and the cold comes back, and you can see we roll it on out. We end up with the ridge out west, a trough in the east. We're seeing this every day. So this increases our confidence that the longer range part of the period, February into early March, could be colder than normal and stormier than normal too. If you get this little activity ramping up in the southern jet stream down here, then you'll have plenty of energy in the pattern to work with, potentially creating a storm, okay? Hope that makes sense. One of the things that we'll look at too is the 850 millibar temperature. So don't just take my word for it that the upper air pattern looks good. What does it look like at 850? Again, remember, this is 5,000 feet off the ground. We show these temperatures because they're not contaminated so much by the daily fluctuations of the sun warming the surface of the earth, and then the nighttime it radiates out and it gets cool. This gives you kind of a good idea of where the cold temperatures at the ground will be. So we roll this out, center of the country, big Barney here coming down, stomping the center part of the country with very cold temperatures. These are minus 15 to minus 20 degrees Celsius, and that's pretty cold. So it moderates a little bit over time, but it spreads on into the southeast. Cold, and then it rebuilds and rejuvenates again. So we've got plenty of cold according to the European ensemble. Good if you like cold and stormy conditions. Same thing with the GFS. You're seeing the same footprint. It moves on off into the kind of the anomaly moves on off to the southeast. The pattern warms up a little bit, but then returns to cold in the east as we get back toward the end of the model. So this is a little chillier. This is a smoothed out ensemble mean. Some members are probably a little warmer than this. Some members are colder than this. And so we see this big signal for chilly in the east. What does that look like? What does that remind us of from before? I think that, let's go back here and take a look if I can find it again. Yeah, here we go. Our MJO phases, right? Look at that. Looks like this, doesn't it? Phase 1. That's what we were in, phase 1. So very good. And moving into phase 2, it'll take a little time to transition. So very good agreement across the ensembles. Okay, now let's take a look at let's go back here. So we'll take a look at the jet stream. The one fly in the ointment that I did mention, and some folks on the weather forum that I post on have mentioned this too, and they're all over it there. So by the way, shameless plug, we post all day about the model. So as these models come in, you can go to southernweather.com and see real-time analysis of what's happening as the model runs come in. So if there's a storm on the horizon, we'll be all over it. We'll be looking at severe weather. We'll be looking at winter weather, all the above. So this is the jet stream signal here. So this is the 300 millibar jet stream according to the European model from today's run, the 12Z run. And so what are we looking at here? You're seeing a big jet in the Pacific. Look how long this thing is. This is circling now from Asia all the way out here into the Pacific Ocean. What you do not want to see happen is this thing translate over here toward the western coast of the United States. If that happens, the United States is going to be flooded with air coming in out of the Pacific. It's mild out here. For East Coast winter storms and cold in the east, you want air coming out of the Arctic. That's not going to happen if you start to pull this jet into the West Coast. Now, some of that, the European model kind of shows that. The overnight run, the 0Z run, showed it a little bit more strongly than the 12Z run, which hopefully is a good thing. But if we roll this forward, you see it kind of make some progress in, breaks apart a little bit, but it's still progressing generally toward the West Coast, and then kind of breaking apart a bit. But if this starts to unfold this way, we're going to pull in all of this mild Pacific air into the pattern. Going to be very difficult to snow in late February and early March in the southeast, particularly if you start to flood the continent with mild Pacific air. So we want to be careful of that. Now, take a look, and I'll watch that over the course of the next couple of days and let you know. So take a look at the European ensemble mean from last night. This is the snowfall map. Really worthless once you get way out in time, except for the places that you know are likely to see snow. But if we pull this forward, you can see the ensemble mean. This is actually an increase from the last ensemble mean. So here are areas in the south, North Carolina, upper south, Tennessee, back toward Arkansas, upstate South Carolina. These areas here, right on the fringe. That doesn't mean anything. It just means that there's the potential. We don't know how big the potential is yet, but there is a potential there to see some wintry weather down in this area. Pulling this on forward, it doesn't really change all that much. It grows in the northeast some. So we're not going to spend time going into all of the various ensemble members. No need to dig into those kind of details this far out. But let's take a look here at how the European model sees. This is from last night. I was telling you about this earlier. So it shows low pressure over South Carolina, snow up here over the Ohio Valley, ice in the mountains and CAD sections. It goes on to just nuke the Northeast. Okay, so that was the last night's European run. If we look at today's, the latest run, we saw that before, but what did it do? It kept the low pressure a little farther to the south, didn't it? Yep, sure did. More snow, more ice farther south. And then it keeps it pretty weak and moves it on off, strengthens it way out here in the Atlantic. So a lot of solutions are on the table for next week. If we look at what's going on upstairs with the European model, here, let's do this for today's run. Let's do the latest run. We can kind of see how that plays out, right? So you've got your 50-50 low. I was talking about this, and I know we're kind of getting long in the tooth here, and I'll wrap this up here in a minute. But watch this feature as this other feature moves in. So you see these lines here, how they're kind of coming in. This illustrates what I was showing you before. You've got confluence here, these height lines, these isobars here. So we've got that coming in, and you've got a confluent flow that would lock in high pressure here. As this system affects, we've probably got a low pressure forming here. So we want this to stay in place as much as we can, get that clockwise flow around, get the counterclockwise flow around the low pressure. We've got nice moisture convergence in here, along with the cold air being laid in place. And so that's what you want to see if you want to look for a winter storm. You want this to hold, or part of this, this confluence needs to hold as long as possible instead of scooting out as fast as it can before that storm system comes in. So that moves on off. Now, let's go and take a quick look at the icon. Man, let's move this on off back here. The 12Z icon today is exactly what we've been talking about. I've told you for the last several days that we're looking at this area along the East Coast, somewhere in this area, for a major winter storm. Now, it's a bad circle and a pretty wide area, but the point is, conditions are ripe for a storm in this area. Now, what does the icon do? Well, we're out of here at 144 hours. This is a long way out. But watch this as we pull this through. So we're going to advance it. Look what it does. It brings a low pressure system together here, icing toward Raleigh and toward the eastern part of Central or North Carolina. Big snows in Virginia, big snows back into Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, western North Carolina. We pull this along. That low really starts to crank, 991 millibars. You got heavy wind-driven ice and snow along the coast. This pink is super duper heavy snow here, probably 2 inches per hour rates probably. So we're coming in here and pulling it on up, 979. So this thing is rapidly deepening. This is the kind of system that I'm talking about. This is one of those systems that you'll remember for quite a long time. It pulls New Jersey up toward Boston, New York City. All of these areas just get pummeled with snow from the icon. The snowfall map is like 30 inches so in parts of these areas, and it's still snowing. And every time I move the mouse, it changes the spot on the screen, so I'll stop doing that so it quits jumping around. But actually, I hit the play button accidentally. So let's stop the play. If it will respond to me, it won't. Pause. There we go. Hey, live TV, folks. So there goes the icon, on, off. Still snowing. Big snowfall map. Man. All right, what's it doing? Why is it doing that? Okay, so we've got, this is our upper air energy coming in here. We've got some various pieces of energy in the jet stream up here at 500 millibars. We bring this along, and look what happens. You get this one out ahead. So this northern stream system is out ahead of this southern stream system. And that's what you want if you're in the south, right? You really, really want this to come in and lay down the cold air, and then this one to come in and either do a very late phase, which is what the icon does. That's why you get a big storm. You phase the two pieces of energy, or come in a little bit behind and not get sheared out and still be able to produce precipitation. So the icon, basically what it's doing here is it's just, we bring this forward and you can see the pieces begin to merge. A little extra energy coming into this northern stream. Those pieces of energy combine and you get a big, look at this, big upper level low here with a big storm system off the coast. So late phase gives you a big storm system, lots of cold air to work with. That's on the table, and so we'll be watching that. Some of these other images, we won't get into all of this stuff here, but quick look at the Canadian. What is it showing? This is 12Z Canadian run. So we've got a little bit of an ice storm. Looks like it's on tap here for North Carolina. And there it goes, similar to the icon. It's rolling that up the coast. You've got snow, ice, sleet, all the above. I'm telling you what, it's exciting. We've got a good opportunity to see something next week. Pretty farther farther to south than we've seen before. This is the icon again. You can see that rolling forward, so we don't need to go back into that. GFS agrees as well. It's just a little bit of a lighter system. So we've got the Canadian on board. We've got the icon on board. We've got the European model for today is actually on board too. If you want to take a look at that, I'll just show you that real quick. Let's go out here. This is the European model. We'll roll this out. And what happens? Look, again, another storm. So same time frame that we're watching, the 20th, 21st, 22nd, somewhere in there. European brings in a nice little hit across the southeast, not nearly as big as the icon. I don't really trust the icon. It's especially out at the end of its range. I don't trust any of these models, to be honest, out at the end of their range. But that is it for today, folks. We've got a lot of weather to watch over the next couple of days. We'll keep you posted here. We'll definitely make sure that you're in the loop as we see new developments and all of this. But I'm excited about the pattern for next week and the next couple of weeks. It's going to be interesting times ahead. And that brings us to the answer to our trivia question for today. So what was our question again? It was, what's the phenomenon where precipitation evaporates or sublimates before it reaches the ground? Dew, graupel, virga, or hydrosuperfractional cold advection? And the answer is no, I'm just kidding. The answer is virga. You probably knew that, but when clouds, you'll see that in the wintertime often. You'll look outside, you'll look up and it looks like the clouds are fuzzy and you're waiting for the snow to fall, and you look on the radar and you see blue pixels and you're wondering, where's the snow? Well, the radar's picking the snow up, but it's melting before it hits the ground. And so you stand here and you look up at the sky and you wait for that first snowflake to make it through. The evaporation is a cooling process. It cools the column. It saturates the column, and eventually, hopefully, it'll make it to the ground and you'll start to see that snow pile up. Virga. All right, well, with that, that is all the time that we have for today. This is Cold Rain reminding you, if you don't like the weather you saw today, there's always a model that might show something better. It's your job to go find it. Maybe check out the Brazilian. Anyway, have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.